Welcome back to the Life Legacy Podcast. And today's a special day. I get to bring on a friend as well as someone that's just got an insane life story. We'll talk about the ups and downs. Literally went from bankruptcy to building a company that did over $1.8 billion in sales in under 3 years, which is insane. This man has also built a real estate portfolio that a lot of people would dream of and has figured out a lot of things in business as well as a good family man. And today I'm just honored to get to introduce you guys to Josh Zieglowsky. I got to say that again. I started losing
You said it good.
my breath on it. Today I get to introduce to you Josh Zieglowsky. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate the warm words as well.
Yeah, of course. I guess my first time I met you, I was getting picked up for us to go down to St. George for an X room with Sean Finnegan and some of the people we know. And you're also a part of that X room where I get picked up in this Mercedes van that is decked out for like a zombie apocalypse, and I'm
That's
like
the
not
best way to describe it.
I'm not kidding. There's like axes. There's really cool. And you and Sean, is that your guys' together?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's 50-50. Originally it was his. So everything interior, exterior, that's all decked out was his doing, and then we became partners on it together. And so we'll bring it to different events and crank the stereo, all that kind of stuff. So it's fun.
Yeah. And I've just seen Josh be someone that is a giver, someone that will pour in information to anyone at any level in business, and I've just respected that from like observing. We haven't really talked about that too much, but I'm really excited to bring you on. I think you have so many nuggets that can help so many entrepreneurs that listen to this, as well as anyone that wants to just go big in life, because Josh, you have gone big, and so grateful to bring you on to help our audience get to know you a little bit. What like lights you up? What gets you passionate?
So what lights me up and gets me passionate is what comes to mind is the word rich. The word rich means something different to everybody. And I remember someone telling me that, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And so what does that word rich mean to you yourself, right? And the word rich means to me is to create more memories with my family. Well, to create more memories, I need to make more money. If I want to have, I could do memories as far as camping and stuff that's more inexpensive memories. I want different memories. I want to, go to Europe. I want to go to, because I've traveled the world. Now I want to bring my family, because I was doing that during when they were young. It was for work. It wasn't for pleasure, And so to me, that's why I get motivated each and every day, is I want to kind of create those more memories. And then there's different parts in your life. Like I even tell people, like your 20s, 30s, and 40s. I'm in my 40s, mid 40s now. Sometimes you have different friends in those decades. Sometimes you have different goals in those decades, and, just like you said, me and my partners, we did really well with ERC, even my affiliates that I consider almost like my partners as well, because we work so closely together, could ride off on the sunset. But now my motivation now is, I got, 4 kids. My boys are 19, 16, so they're obviously older. They're already talking about business. My 19-year-old is doing summer sales for Vivint, learning, cutting his teeth at door to door, Now I'm thinking about, I want to be their partners. I want to be eventually a good grandpa and have time to, spend time with my grandkids eventually, And so I feel like I have about 5 to 6 years more push. And then after that, it's going to be like, I want to kind of relax, because my youngest, she's 11. So she'll be kind of like that senior, almost going out to college or get some more education after high school. And that's kind of what my push is right now.
Yeah. Love that. So we got 6 more years.
Yeah.
Push. And for you, like, was entrepreneurship always a known fact of what you were going to do? Was that something in the family? Like, where did that come from?
Good question. So my dad, he was actually one of the first 50 employees for FedEx.
Huh.
So, and I say that because like he received a pension. He even talks about his checks bouncing the first year or two of being a FedEx employee. Now FedEx, a worldwide company. But he retired after 20 years there. And then he was young. I want to say he was probably my age, my mid 40s. And then he's basically been a glorified truck driver, meaning like he's done over the road for potatoes. He's done oil stuff, different things. But when you're kind of your own truck driver, you're your own boss too. So I've seen the highs and lows of, what he wanted to do. Then he wanted to expand it, and love my dad, but he wasn't that organized business person. Yeah. And he ended up losing, he collateralized his house, his backhoe, his motorhome, lost it all through it was like during the mortgage meltdown happened, but it had nothing to do with that. It was just the oil business was like very dry out in where he was at. And so I always saw that from a distance, like, man, I don't know about being my own boss. But then my very first opportunity was I was working at Sears, and I saw the guys working straight commission. I've never done straight commission in my life. Before, I was in the fitness and department, which is base plus commission. Well, this is the appliance electronics, and my buddy's telling me how much he's making, but it's straight commission, and you're like, man, that's a huge risk. So I did it. I said, hey, I want to try to get a position there. I applied for a couple months, got my position there, and then started making my own money. My own money as in, just like as an entrepreneur, or if you're a straight commission, you eat what you kill. Yeah. If you do well, you do really well. If you're not that good, you're not going to make that much money, right? And so I saw I had a different skill. Then that turned into being in the mortgage business, which is straight commission, but now you're your own boss, right? Mm-hmm. So I kind of continued to kind of what I call walking up the ladder of different business opportunities, get into real estate investing, and then like kind of seeing that. Then the mortgage meltdown happened, kind of had to put that on halt for probably 2-3 years. Mm-hmm. Then got back into it. Then, Sean Finnegan was my boss, because he had a company that did seminars nationally, and so I not only consulted, I sometimes spoke because I had real estate investing experience, which in that industry, not a lot of people do. They're just really good at speaking in front of the room. Yeah. They might have done 1 or 2 deals a year. I was doing, 30 deals a year. So anyways, that kind of just propelled me to like, now I have a thick candy shell is what I call it, of being an entrepreneur, being that, I'm willing to take that risk and put that money in, not money, I'm sorry, time. So I always tell people is like, I try to do as little money as possible if I'm doing a startup, but I'm willing to put in the time, right? Mm-hmm. If it turns, because there's tons of failures, Babe Ruth was known for his home runs, but he has, double amount of strikeouts and home runs, and that's my life, is I've had a lot more strikeouts than home runs.
Mm. What have been some of the most meaningful strikeouts that you got to learn from?
So how ERC started is, and that's probably the biggest one, because I convinced my parents. Well, my dad actually brought me the deal, and then other friends to invest, because we already had an oil business, but now the guy that we were working for was going to give us his what they call master service agreement, MSA. His valuation was $8 million. And I negotiated, say, hey, if we put $1 million down, you carry the other $7 million, then we'll pay that off in 5 years. Well, this is 2 months before the pandemic. No. And the P&Ls, everything was great. I mean, this guy was making some good money, right? So it was easy for us to maybe pay it off in 2 years. Pandemic happened. All oil wells were plugged. And I remember reading articles in the newspaper. That's never happened in 86 years in Wyoming. And so all I was trying to do is find extra stimulus for the business. We did the PPP loans. People may have heard that. We even got state of Wyoming gave us a grant for $150,000, right? And anyways, I was just playing cards with some other entrepreneur friends of mine, and one said, have you ever thought about this ERC thing? This is in March of 21, right when it started. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. He goes, oh, take a look at it, because if you have W-2 employees and your oil business had W-2 employees, you'd be able to get some money. So I looked it up. My CPA was Robert Kiyosaki's CPA. Tom Wheelwright wrote the book Tax-Free Wealth. I called his partner, Casey. That's who my contact was. I said, can you help me out with this credit? And I've been on the IRS side. It's confusing. And he's like, sorry, I do your payroll. I do your taxes, your 1040s, 1120s. This is a payroll credit. So you need to talk to your ADP or Gusto rep, which I did. And both of them said, sorry, we don't amend returns. We just do active returns. So you'll have to talk to a third-party service. So I'm continuing to go down this rabbit hole, and I'm almost at this point of not believing this is going to happen, right? Everyone's pushing me off on someone else. I talked to 2 or 3 people, and I was like, man, maybe I could do this myself. I text one of my best friends, Justin, who's one of the other co-founders, and I said, hey, I think I have an opportunity for us. And it's funny because he still has this screenshot of that text. And the next day or two, we whiteboarded it out, and I remember us even putting a performa together and said, man, if we can each make 40 grand a month, we'll freaking kill this. And then we turned into, billions in sales. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. And what were some of the key things that made it so it didn't just be 40,000 a month? Like a lot of people have this big dream and the plan is to get it, to the billions of dollars, but just it's so rare that anyone does it at that level. What do you think were the key pieces of success that really moved the needle in that way?
I'm a big proponent of the book, Who Not How. And what comes to mind is I was at the point of like, hey, if I want to succeed past that 40 grand a month or whatever it is, or even to get to there, I needed other people that had better skills than I did. And that's where the book really helped me with that. Because before, I didn't want to slice the pie more than, a couple people, And especially in real estate, people always have that like kind of mindset like, oh, I got to slice it with this guy now. What's he or she going to do?
Yeah.
And so there's a trust factor when you bring on partners, 1. But 2, I still remember like driving to meet another partner, Mark Sullivan, who I've known at this time 15, 20 years. We've been partners in the past. I knew Mark was really good at operations and sales. He's a good sales guy and just kind of sees things in a different lens, a lot of people. And I told Justin, my partner at the time, I said, hey, we should meet with Mark and have him, work with us. At the first, we were talking about maybe a JV partnership. And Justin's never met him at this point. And so there was a little hesitation on Justin's side. I still remember driving in the car. We met with Mark at Panera Bread or whatever, the kind of a Panera Breadish company in Draper. And then we were driving home. He's like, oh, dude, I can see Mark, what his skills are. And then as we continue to bring other partners, there is already a guy named Rusty, Chandler, Jerry, Shane, all these other partners, and Rocky. These are all partners that all had different skills. And we sliced the pie quite a bit. I just named like 7 or 8 people there. Mm-hmm. We ended up having another company, RevRoad, that came and was one of our partners as well.
So was that like 7 founding equity partners right there going into
Yeah. So it originally started as me and Justin, and then we were really close with Chandler and Rusty at the time too, and so we talked to them. And what's funny is we didn't know where this is going to go. Even Chandler was debating whether he wanted to finish his business degree at BYU or become our partner. I remember going golfing with him, was like, hey, you need to make a decision, and the guy's one of my best friends as well. And you kind of look back at those little team experiences like, wow, he had to talk to his wife and like, hey, there's this business. I don't know where it's going to be. I mean, I don't know how this conversation went, but there's this business. I don't know where it's going to go. But I mean, Josh has kind of encouraged me, because I encouraged him, why don't you take school, hold that off for a year, and just do this. That's a hard thing for even a friend to say.
To give that direction to someone else.
Because I saw the vision pretty early, and luckily it ended up being bigger than we thought. Okay. But that's, to answer your question, everyone had different skills. Not one person, I think, maybe a couple of us had maybe some of the similar skills, but we all had different skills. And honestly, when I die, I'll probably say it's one of my best partnerships I've ever had in my life, because we all had the same direction. I don't remember too much arguments, Yeah. We were very honest with each other. We always wanted to stay above board. And I say that because we had some competitors that were a little bit on the gray area.
Yeah.
We were always hiring attorneys. We were always trying to be consulted by tax attorneys to make sure we just never crossed a line.
Yeah.
So
through that journey of success, I've never heard one journey of success that didn't have, like extremely hard moments.
Mm-hmm.
And to get to that level, I would bet my life that there were some moments that were pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, what were some of those, and how did you overcome them?
So mine, it comes to two things. One that I've talked to a lot of people about. Two, I've never even talked to not anyone on a podcast or anything about, and I have no problem talking about it. First one is when we started the business, the one thing we knew is it took about 6 to 9 months for the IRS to send out checks. So with that, we were building up staff. We were telling more and more affiliates about this opportunity because we ended up having 50,000 affiliates. But I'm telling them like, hey, work hard. There's going to be a check coming in 6 to 9 months. Believe me, there was after about 5 or 6 months, there was like sleepless nights. Like, is this ever going to happen? Because if not, like my reputation is tarnished for a long time.
Yeah,
because I brought in thousands of people. And some of them have actually spent money up front in marketing and, going on PPC ads and Facebook ads, to get deals. Because we said, we're not going to do marketing. We want to compete with our affiliates. We want them to do that, but we're willing to pay them a big commission when it comes. Right. Mm. So me and Justin and Mark talked about this 2-3 nights ago, actually, is right when that happened. I remember Mark sent a screenshot of like a stack of checks, because the IRS, they're all old school, right? The sending out snail mail, like they didn't do like ACH deposits. It was checks. So I remember having this huge like mound of checks and like, oh my gosh, it's turning a corner. And then it turned a corner fast. It was like we had to hire a whole mail room because of all the mail we were getting. Right?
Wow. Not
just checks, but notices. IRS is all about sending out notices. Second one, which was really challenging for me, was I just talked about that oil business that I had my parents in and my friends. Well, my parents, I love my parents. They're actually, we've been reconciled since this happened, and they actually are, I didn't want to give them a house. That wasn't my goal. But they're staying in one of my houses rent-free till they die.
It's amazing.
So, but I didn't hear anything from him for a while. And I was reaching out to him and my parents sued me for their investment. Mm. And I remember being at the dinner table and having a process server at my front door. And I was like, what is this? And I didn't even read it. I was just like, oh, because I've signed a couple of things like that over my career. And I'm like, I'll just get to it after dinner. I open it up and I tell my wife, like, oh my gosh, it's my parents. And they're suing me for the investment they put into this oil business, which my dad's the one who told me about it, and I put in my own money. Mm. So that was hard. I called them, text them, they didn't answer. So then I had to work through their attorney, right? And then I ended up getting an attorney. And they lost originally because it was an investment, not a loan. There was no fraud, nothing. So that said, that kind of sat with me for a bit because like what was hard in the business is I still remember this one time we were presenting to all these banks, Zion's Bank, and Zion's invited like 60 other banks for us to do ERC with. And me and Mark we were the front face of this webinar. Well, there was this one gal that reached out. Well, she looked online and she saw that there was something in the court system of the Zieglowsky parents versus Josh Zieglowsky. What is this? How can we trust this guy? And she was like blasting it on this chat on Zoom. Mm. And only out of the 60, only probably 7 or 8 banks worked with us after that. Yeah. But it was hard because I have partners and they already knew the story. I already told them prior to. It wasn't new to them. Yeah. But it hurt because I felt like I was holding my own company back from what was going on personally. And anyways, there was a space of months, probably a year. Didn't see him. I was talking to my sisters all the time. They couldn't believe that they would do that either. And then just hit me one day. It was probably a year or 2 later. I told my wife, I said, hey, I can either keep going through this the rest of my life or we have the means to just give them their investment back. Even though I'm not required to. Yeah. I decided to do that. So my wife and I wrote a check and we communicated through the attorney, and he probably still took a chunk out of that. I don't know. I've never even asked him. But I wrote a letter. I said, I'm not expecting you to call me back just because I'm writing you a check. I really want it to be genuine if you reach back out. I've reached out a dozen times, haven't heard back. And so that about 4 months later, I was at my niece's lacrosse game and they were there, and they came up and gave my son and I a hug. And we've somewhat talked, but not like to an extent that I'd probably like. But that was probably the hardest thing. Since then, I see them, 4 or 5 times a year. They stay in one of our houses, rent free. They're good people. It's just, I think they were led themselves down a wrong path, and no communication.
Yeah,
that was tough.
That's really hard. Wow. And I think with that story, unfortunately, like a lot of people do business together in family, and things don't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a lot of people that will actually connect with that story. For you, what has helped you heal from that experience?
Now I can honestly, if they die unexpectedly, or if I die unexpectedly, I feel like if I die unexpectedly, it's my wife that would be like, oh, I'm glad that he kind of went out that way. If they die unexpectedly, or by old age in 5-10 years, I feel like I did a good part of it. So I think it made it better.
Yeah.
For that. And I didn't want to go. I just don't like. Number one, I always tell people I won't never be in politics, because then there's another half that won't like you.
Yeah.
I don't like people not liking me. And I like to, do as much as I can not to have something jeopardize that.
Yeah. From my perspective, you're a very likable guy, which makes things a little easier. Mm-hmm. You were saying, and if you'd rather not talk about this, it's okay, but you would hope to have a couple more conversations on that aspect with your parents. I'm just curious what that would be.
I'm kind of curious on what led them to that, even calling an attorney without calling me.
Yeah.
The last time I remember my dad, because I have a travel notary business, and during the pandemic, it was huge because no one was going to title companies. Yeah. I had to hire 4 or 5 notaries so I could fulfill the business, but I was doing really good financially. And with that, I remember like, hey, Dad, let's have lunch together. And I picked him up, and I had a brand new truck. And he's like, where'd you get this truck? I'm like, oh, notary business. And he thought I took money from the oil business to pay for the truck. Because he's like, well, did you get it from the oil business? No. And then I hadn't talked to him. And then all of a sudden I get that notice like 2-3 weeks later. And then I was kind of recollecting like, why did that transpire there? And I wondered if, because I said I never made $1. And that in my letter I sent, when I sent the check, that was part of it too. I was like, I never made $1 in the oil business. I actually lost money. Yeah. Not only from that, I had to hire an attorney to defend myself in it. So just the more of like, and granted, if I wanted to, I probably could ask that. I kind of don't want to be the one that starts with the conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, like what kind of started that? Then why did you fulfill it? Why didn't you reach out to me? That type of thing.
If there's someone that's going through like a family turmoil moment like that, where, litigation is going on, lawyers, or even just a bad business deal that happened that has like hurt the family connection in a deep way, what advice would you want to give to that person with already going through that?
Yeah. So 2 things come to mind. One is, that's the one thing we always learn from what we've gone through mistakes wise, right? I mean, I tell people that's how I'm even have a portion of success in business, is because I've had so many failures. I tell my kids that all the time. But not just that, is I want to do my best. And you talked about your dad just a little bit ago. There's a lot of problems that happen when the patriarch, dies. That sometimes there's contention in family. Right now, I have 4 kids. We have a congruent relationship. You always hear about, and my wife and I talk about this on, man, when we're kind of predicting, we hope that the new in-law comes in and there's not going to be a problem, because that can create contention. And I mean, you're going to choose your spouse no matter what, husband or wife, whatever it is. So that can kind of create things. And so we're trying to make sure that we are always a open family. And, as an in-law comes in, we want them to kind of, mesh with that if mom and dad die unexpectedly, that you guys can continue to be a good relationship. You talked about you do stuff with your brothers.
Yeah.
I know all your family, but that's one thing that comes to mind. Two is, because I've gone through that, my nephew, he came to me about 2-3 years ago asking to borrow money. Because he lost a sales job, which was had a really good sales job. The company went belly up, and over time he has ended up sleeping on a couch of his friend's couch, being married. So that's not the best thing, right? And having a newborn too. So all that happened at once. So I gave him money the first time. The second time he asked, which was probably about a couple months later, I was like, hey, I don't like to give money the second time. I like to kind of figure out, like, what's the solution? How can we? And I said, dude, you're a really good chef. Why don't you? What's big, I think, right now is doing weekly meals. Why don't we just start a weekly meal business? I'll be the investor and we'll be partners. And we've started that in Boise, right? And at this time, he hasn't talked to his parents for a couple of years. And I won't get into why, because I think both sides had their own opinions. I mean, for me, the outside looking in, I'm like, you're saying this and you guys are saying this. I think you guys are over, talking each other a little bit. And I think they both had realized that too, but they're also waiting for the other person to react. That they both were telling me that, right? So this is my brother and sister-in-law, and this is my nephew, right? Well, he and I started the business, and then about 2-3 months ago, I just brought up to him, I don't know what started it, but I brought up to him like, hey man, we were at a basketball tournament for my son that's 16 up in Boise. And it was just me and my son that went up there. My wife had something, she had to stay back. And my wife is like, hey, you should invite Jay, that's her brother, and Gina. And I said, well, I know Nick's coming. I mean, how's that going to work? So I just decided, you know what? Because I said to Jay and Gina, I said, hey, Nick's going to be there. Is that a problem? Well, we'll probably stay back then. Okay, well, then there was like 3-4 games, so I'm like kind of organizing. I hate to be in the middle, like, okay, you come this time, and then I just finally went to Nick. I said, hey, why don't you be the bigger person? I'm not saying Jay and Gina is not the bigger person either. They were, in their defense, they were instructed to wait until they hear, not to talk to him again. Yeah. So I just said to him, I said, hey, this is what they're saying. I don't want to be in the middle in anymore. But at the same token, he has another newborn, which named his son, middle name after me, so Jericho Joshua. So I'm very close to my nephew, and I just said to him, I said, hey, going through what I've gone through, I can honestly say that you'll just continue to eat you up, and you'll regret it over time, because sometimes you have to think about, it's not about you anymore. Now you have 2 kids that if grandma and grandpa die unexpectedly, they're going to be asking you questions like, well, how was grandma and grandpa? Why didn't we ever see him? Oh, we got in this fight. And I kind of gave him a scenario. Like, you kind of think about it sometimes, like, oh, well, that's kind of, I was very opinionated, or I wanted my message to come across at that time. Now, 2-3 years later, so to answer your question, I know it was a long answer, but I try to say, like, try to figure out a way that you can have a conversation. Now, in my case, like we said, I really haven't had that conversation. It was more of like, hey, let's just make it work.
Yeah, take care of.
And I feel like they've had that same thing. I don't think they've had that deeper conversation. And sometimes you're like, is it needed? Maybe it can make it worse, but let's just kind of, make it smooth. And so anyways, he reached out and said, love to, connect with you guys. And he ended up seeing his dad at one of the games. So he ended up meeting him and stuff. And he was kind of avoiding it a little bit, because I said, hey, I thought you were coming at halftime. Now it's like the end of the game and he still hasn't came. And I'm like, oh, he's going to bail out. And then, to his credit, he was in the parking lot. He ended up, talking to his dad, and they gave a hug. And then a couple of days later, he texts me and says, hey, I invited him over for dinner this weekend. Wow. So they reconciled. He sent me a screenshot with all of them at dinner. And he said his oldest son, he's got 3 sons, but the 2 that are at home, the one is probably 4. he was like loving his grandma and grandpa. So I told him that's kind of the reason sometimes you have to do it for someone else instead of yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Also, I mean, the part you played in that, you have all this business success in that, but like that could generationally change that family forever,
sure.
where that could be one of the most significant things that you've played a part in.
Yeah.
It
did feel good. Cool. I remember telling Taryn, I said, I've done a lot of stuff in business, but when you hit like personal chords like that, it does feel really, really good.
Definitely. My father and I, we had probably the most volatile relationship out of like him and all the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we both loved each other so much, and we wanted to help each other. And that was a hard thing. And there were some moments where I was extremely confused at some decisions that were going on. And I remember I felt like so hurt. And sometimes I would express that, mm-hmm. and it would come off negative, and vice versa. And then I was super fortunate. I just had a couple moments, and for anyone, I'm bringing this up because anyone at home that's got internal family issues, it's the most important thing to mend those. And something that helped me when it came to forgiveness and getting at the point in the table where you can just come from a place of love was just praying to God, asking how can I help me understand how I can forgive my dad? Like what are the steps that I need to take? And then I totally had a paradigm shift of, hey, this isn't like a father-son relationship anymore. This is like take care of your dad. Like try and just help him and help him find happiness in life. And when that changed, I just had this full different side of softness. Yeah. And then from that change, a couple years later, he ends up dying, and it sucks, Yeah. And then I get to look back on those moments, and I would give up anything to just take back one argument.
Yeah, for sure.
And you really would. I
mean, I'm sure in that case you feel very proud of yourself for like doing it when you look back and like, wow, look what happened 2 years later to his life. But and the thing is too is in this day and age, you look at all these generations. Your grandparents, my grandparents. The way they structured our parents, and now our parents to us. At this age, they want more communication. Yeah. And that's where I kind of give my parents the benefit of the doubt a little bit. It's like, hey, they're not the type that wants to have that communication sometimes and that conversation. We do. Yeah. And that's why sometimes there's contention or friction is the best word.
For sure.
From that, right?
Because those things, when big mistakes happen or whatever, it's like, this is just an area we don't talk about.
Yeah.
And that is the older generation.
It is older generation.
I feel extremely grateful because I ended up pushing sometimes on those. Mm-hmm. And like when it came to my dad, I haven't prayed for any human more than I've prayed for my dad. And my last conversation with him, he was in Mexico, and he'd lost like this jewelry that was decently expensive, and we're talking. I was like, you know what, Dad, like I'm going to say a prayer for you that you can find it. I could tell he was just stressing about it.
Sure.
It didn't really matter that much. But my last text I ever got from him, he sent the picture of the jewelry, and he just said, hey, Jaxon, I love you so much. Thanks for the prayers. And to me, that was like his God's gift to me of like, hey, you've prayed for this human more than anything. Mm-hmm. And this is like just a blessing to give. And so being able to have that peace now when I don't have the option to change anything past it, I would just advocate to anyone figure out how to make amends where it all feels peaceful.
Totally. I think putting peace in our heart is very important, and sometimes it's there's a lot of give and take with it
Yeah.
because sometimes we don't like to look at ourselves in that situation that we've done anything wrong.
Yeah.
And maybe so. Maybe you haven't done anything wrong. Maybe, you're 50-50, whatever it is. But I think being what I call the bigger person, and taking that, or that's probably a bad word. Maybe it's just taking the initiative of just trying.
Yeah.
If it's still a closed door, then, you at least know in your heart you've tried, and I think that's kind of the best way to kind of approach it.
For sure. Well, with everything you've built and stuff, what do you feel like have been some of the most important lessons that people can learn from your story? It doesn't even have to be about business. It can be about anything. Like, I know you have an amazing family. What have been some of the lessons that you feel like have impacted your life that you'd want other people to understand?
I think about lessons. I think about my, you said awesome family. Like it starts obviously where our family started with me and my wife, right? And I mean, she's an absolute rock star. I mean, my best friend. Just all the stuff. And I say that because I wouldn't be where I'm at today without her. Not just because she, birthed, beautiful kids for us. Our third one, she's adopted, but so she's birthed 3 of our 4 kids. But it's also the communication and like all the different failures of business I've talked to her about, and like, oh, this is gonna be our next biggest thing, and a couple months later it ends up being nothing, and it was a lot of wasted time. But I've never used that as far as wasted time. As far as I've learned a lot from my mistakes. Like my college basketball coach used to say, "You win or you learn," And I've always had that mentality of you win a game, you win a game. If you lose the game, you learn from that game. And so we'd always say, "You win or you learn." We use that in my own family all the time. I use that with my kids, and so they they're young, but they see a lot of the things as far as what I went through, and I really appreciate them looking at me as a mentor as well, not just a father. Like my son that's doing door to door. It's his first year, so he's cutting his teeth, and it's frustrating. He's also going through like having a subpar boss, let's say. I won't say anything negative, but my wife at first, she was like, well, maybe he should just come home. I'm like, no, that's exactly what he needs to go through. Because, when you going through a job and you have a boss or a manager or a general manager, and there's someone that you just, I can tell you from Sears, from I worked at Gart Sports. There's some people, managers there that I did not like. But I had to go and clock in every day, and I had to be almost a chameleon, is what I call it. You got to adjust to getting ridiculed from a person that you probably don't like, because kind of like the same conversation. You're doing it for someone else now too. Now I got a family to feed. At the time it was just me and my wife, but So that I went on for other side of the mountain there, but I think that's the biggest thing for me is like kids and mentorship.
Kids and mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. How's your wife shown up for you?
Like how so?
Like through these hard moments, how did she show up for you?
How did she show up? She's always been supportive. She's also the person that will give you the real deal on what she's seeing. She's actually the one that really helped me do the best I can of always being upfront with certain things. And like it came when I was in the mortgage business, and I started with American First Credit Union, then I started my own brokerage, and then I was recruited to a company called World Lending Group, which is a multi-level mortgage company. Back then, they're not around anymore. But I already knew a lot of people in the mortgage space and the real estate space. So I easily brought a lot of mortgage officers in. Back then in the state of Utah, all you needed to pay is $200 and you're a loan officer. Now they do testing and they do all this other stuff. Back then, just if you had $200 and you had a pulse, you can get a license, right, to do mortgages. And so I ended up over, I don't know, a year, I had like 1,000 loan officers. On paper, it looked like I was making a lot of money, but I wasn't. I was making like $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month. But I should have been making 40 grand or so. Well, my upline, I won't say his name. He was a mentor of mine. Even when I was in middle school in sports, being in the MLM space, he would embellish. He would say that, hey, Josh, he's one of the top recruiters in the company. He's making 40 grand a month. And then I had to kind of go along with it. And I went along with it for months, and I kind of noticed when I was bringing other friends in, and they started asking questions that they probably could see right through me that I was lying. Right. Yeah. And it was my wife that actually piped up and said, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't be around like this. Either you need to quit or we just got to do something. She wasn't going to leave me, but it was like, this isn't like us. Yeah. And so that conversation, I went to my upline. I just said, hey, dude, I think I'm out. Like, I can't be telling people this anymore. Like, it is eating me. It makes me feel awkward when you say it in front of people and I'm like having to go along with it with a smile. So early on, I learned that lesson. But I also learned a lot I'm always learning from her on, she always likes to have good energy, good spirit, with anything that she does. She's extremely talented in that space and very supportive of me, just like, hey, I'm going to go do this today, or, I got to go out of town or whatever. She's always been supportive in that regard. Yeah. Sometimes she doesn't like it, but she's very supportive.
Yeah. And where did there's a free giving side from you that I've seen. Where did that kind of stem from?
I think the thing is like, people are always watching you as an example, right? And so same thing. I was watching other people as their example. And I say this all the time with my friend Sean Finnegan. I was just seeing what he was doing from afar. I was seeing other people, what they're doing from afar. And even when I was like donating my time and even money to charity events, I remember going home and like thinking like, wow, that was really powerful. That was more powerful than making a big commission check, because that was cool. You're excited, but like, so there's something that's heartwarming about that. Like we talked about my nephew and my brother and sister-in-law, like that to me was like, that's something that you want to die, like I talk about, and it's actually someone else that gave me this example, is we call it the giving muscle. We're always trying to build muscles, but you got to build that giving muscle. And from that, it could be donating, because there's a exercise that Finnegan taught his group called 7 Layers Deep. And it was basically towards real estate, but you can do with it whatever you want, creating your why. What is the why? It starts by, why do you want to be successful at real estate? Well, to make more money. Why do you want to make more money? To get out of debt. Why do you want to get out of debt? It continues to get deeper and deeper. And it's funny because I've consulted over, I'd say 2,000-3,000 people, and I've heard what it comes down to, their why. It could be donating money to their church, or more time to their church, or other opportunities, more time with their family. It starts with money, ends with time, right? And I've heard that, and a lot of people don't do anything. They want to do that, but they want to make the money first. And sometimes I kind of give them a suggestion, like, why don't you just put an hour a month into going to, I don't know, like a kitchen and serve to homeless people or something. You'd leave there like really, like that could turn into 2 hours the next month or whatever it is. And so I started doing that on my own. I didn't go to a kitchen, but like when I coached my sons in basketball, number one, I loved that, but also I was giving my time up as being a coach. I didn't want any money out of it. But also, like during the season, this is when they're younger, we would donate our time. We'd go into Salt Lake, and this is always during the winter, and we would roll burritos at this place that my friend was in charge of. We'd roll burritos and we'd go deliver them to homeless people. We did that in our third year. Then there was a point that got a little scary. So we stopped doing that because it did scare some of the kids on what the homeless people, what they were doing. But for the most part, they would talk about it all year. Their parents would talk about it all year, like how awesome that was. And they loved the kid, had the pictures, and also I would kind of use it as an example, because I would see guys walking by the homeless shelter and they're literally sleeping in snow with no sleeping bag. Their legs are literally probably getting almost frostbite, and how cold it was. And I was trying to think, what's a good way to talk to these kids about, like, and I just said, hey, all these guys and gals are here because of choices they made, not because they're a bad person, but they made a choice and now they're kind of living with this choice. Some of them get so used to their lifestyle that they don't know how to get out of this, And so it was good for them to kind of see, like, and, about drugs or whatever it is. And I'm kind of talking about, like, drugs could have been the choice. It could have been a different choice, but you got to see this as, like, do you want to be here in 30 years sleeping on this piece of snow? Yeah. None of them want to, right? So it kind of gives them a good example of, number one, giving, but number two is, like, what they don't want and how they need to strive in their life.
Love that. What's been your spiritual journey throughout all of this?
I've had an up and down spiritual journey. I grew up LDS, being the president of the deacons, teachers, all that kind of stuff. Growing up, I grew up in a small town called Mountain Green. And I have no problem talking about this either. There's gonna be a lot of my neighbors like, well, I didn't even know that about Josh. So I was called to go to Brazil on my mission. And this is getting very, very vulnerable here. But about 6 weeks in, I went to my branch president. I said, hey, me and my wife were, having sex. And I need to take care of it, because they say in the MTC to make sure you take care of that before you go. And fast forward, he says, oh, I think you'll be back, because it was just that one gal, which was my girlfriend, but now my wife now. And you'll be back. Yeah, I think you'll be back, because I've had some guys have multiple women and they're back in a couple weeks. So I went, but he goes, it's not my choice. So my stake president sent me home. And then I got a letter about 2-3 weeks later to go to the disciplinary council. Fast forward 4 hours later, I was excommunicated. And that was hard, because the couple questions they asked was like, was it multiple women? No. Would you come back to the church if you were exed? And I was like thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, I would. And then at 12:30 at night, it was 12:30 in the morning, I got my car, and it was one of the first times, and I share this because of this part. At the age of 8, a lot of us were baptized, right? Mm-hmm. With my kids, I'm a little bit different with what I tell them about baptism, because I want them to make that choice. Because sometimes people's like, oh, I'm so glad you made that choice. And I sometimes like, did they or did their parents? Yeah. Because it was the first time in my life I got in my car and I felt alone, because technically I had no Holy Ghost, right? And I remember crying for a good 30 minutes. And back then we didn't really have cell phones. So I literally just drove to my girlfriend's house, and because she was wondering what was going to happen, and I couldn't call her and tell her I was on my way. I got there at 1:00 in the morning, and she was still awake, and we talked about it, and she felt just as responsible, because she's the other side of the what we were doing. And anyways, about 3-4 years later, I had a home teacher in Syracuse. That's where we were living at the time, and he was just, obviously, I think he was called to kind of, get me going to church again, because like I was saying, mine was a roller coaster. So I was like, I felt like everything was against me. So we didn't really go. We'd go to like friends' kids' baptism, or, a blessing, baby blessing or something, but I would never go active for 3-4 years. And then I got rebaptized. And through my rebaptism, I actually called my parents the night before and asked if they could come. And I guarantee it was a shock for them, because they just did not know that even happened. Yeah. And so that was cool to have them there. They're very supportive. Yeah. So that was that. We end up
Well,
You know,
really quick, what was the change that made you? I mean, that's such an extremely hard experience, and I could see so many reasons why you would feel so much negativity and resentment and a bunch of negative feelings.
mhm.
What made that pivotal choice where you're like, yeah, I want to get baptized again?
I really can't remember. I just remember it's kind of like when people say, the Spirit was kind of prompted me. I would say that's probably the answer.
Yeah,
I just remember feeling very good about maybe coming back now, getting more, I don't want to say religion, I want to say spiritual piece of my life,
yeah,
and so I felt like that was a good place to find it.
mm,
And it was just kind of a choice that my wife and I talked um, about and decided to do it. And, and since then, I would say now and it's funny because I moved back up to Mountain Green. So I was excommunicated in this church in Mountain Green I grew up with. And then I moved to Syracuse, Layton, and that's probably a 23-year turn.
yeah,
And then there's another story, but we end up moving back into Mountain Green where we live today. We've been there 3 years. I remember like my wife and I going to church our very first time. And I remember being in the chapel and in sacrament meeting, I whispered to my wife, I'm like, the last time I was here, it just hit me. I was excommunicated in this building. I can show you the room, all that kind of stuff. And that's a weird feeling, right? It's been that long. It's been 20 plus years, and, anyways, it was just kind of like I cried because I'm like, wow, it's crazy to think like, you have, this heartache, honestly, towards that couple people that made those choices that, to the church. There's all these like things to now I look at it as I'm glad it happened. And people's like, well, you glad it's happened? It's like a friend of mine, actually my partner in ERC, he lost a son when the son was probably 4 months old. And he's like, people think it's weird I say this, but I'm kind of glad it happened in my life that I don't want to, not like he wanted to lose his son, but he needed some closure and some changes in his life. And that kind of helped him. That actually helped me. I'm not a judgmental person from it. When people tell me their story on what they've been going through or their, like with the church, especially like, oh, my dad, he was cheating on my mom and this is what's happened. I'm like, oh, that's unfortunate. Whereas I think my reaction would be a little different if I didn't go through my own experience where I felt like I was in the corner and people were looking at me that way. Cause I don't want people to, that it's kind of about the choices. That was that choice and it was a bad choice. But what's the next step to work towards, something better? Totally. And that's the way I kind of look at things now is, just like business, I've had those failures, I don't know if I consider that a failure, but it's something that was very dark in my life and it was hard at the time. I look back and I'm like, I'm glad it happened because I look at everything totally differently now. And I'm very supportive on people's journey, direction. Like when I say that wasn't because of the religion, is because I want to be more spiritual. I have my own kids, question things with the church. And I always say, I just want you to make sure you have a love of Christ and the Lord, and that's where I want you to start.
Wow.
So,
well, thank you for sharing. I love the vulnerability and like, these are the harder topics to talk about that I think a lot of people will get a lot of like edification from these types of conversations, so I appreciate you bringing that to the table and being willing to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And for those that might want to reach out to you and talk to you, where could people find you?
Yeah, so I would say easiest is I'm on Instagram. I changed it a couple years ago to the Josh Z. I think on my hat somewhere says JZ. I'm the I was going to say something funny, but it won't be that funny. But no, that's the easiest way to find me. I even wrote a book called Take Your Shot. It's a combination between business and entrepreneurship. It talks about some of the failures that I've gone through, and maybe you can relate to that. But that's the best way to kind of find me is the Josh Z. And I try to add content for people I created a team about a little over a year ago when I started my book. And what we try to do is just try to help people that are maybe struggling in business. That's a lot of my audience is people that are executives, salespeople, entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Maybe just kind of help them just kind of get up over the hump. Like even my son being in Vivint, he talks about like, hey, being your own boss, number one is lonely, but number two is it's I need to learn skills on how to continue to be self-motivated every day. I said that's actually really important because a lot of people don't realize that all those little things that we do need to be self-motivated. And so I will create that content to maybe help you, get that motivation for the day or the week.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, today unintentionally, I woke up at 4:30 just cause, you wake up feeling like you got to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And, but I think it comes from a really deep why of that. And so I haven't read your book yet, but I am going to, and I'm excited for it. And before we wrap up, I'm curious if you had all your loved ones in a room and you knew it was the last time that you were going to see them, and they were asking for you to share anything that you wanted to share with them, what would you want to tell them?
If my loved ones in the room and it's my last time I'm going to be able to talk to them, I would tell them to, number one, the one thing that I've tried to do in my life is create love with all you guys. I want you guys to continue to create that and build that love together. You guys are going to all get married, and you're going to have different spouses. And I would love to see from the top that, you guys are continuing to build that love for each other. And if I could be any type of example in my life to you guys, it would be that I showed that love to your mom and to you guys. And I'd hope that you guys continued on that with your kids and your spouses and each other.
I love that. Well, for me, this has been a super powerful conversation. And again, thank you for just showing up in such a special way. And I've loved seeing how you just show up for people, and you do really give from the soul. And I appreciate you coming, and I'm honored to get to interview you and talk with you and learn from you. And so this has been an episode of the Life Legacy Podcast. And Josh, it's been an honor.
Yeah. Thanks, Jaxon. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah. Dang, man. Amazing stuff. Serious. Thank you.